Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Get Busy with Kit and Jim. Actually, today it's Get Busy Without Kit and Get Busy with Jim. Kit is actually, she's going to be in the audience, I believe, helping to keep a lively discussion going out there. So, hey, Kit, thank you for hanging out in the audience, and thank you for monitoring the comment section and keeping it active out there. So I totally appreciate that. So again, welcome to Get Busy. I'm so honored once again to have Angela Daffron from Soul Models, and she's got a lot of other cool things on her plate as well. And she brought Marty Gruber with her. So without any further ado, I will throw this over to Angela Daffron, author of Soul Models, to introduce herself. Welcome, Angela and Marty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back on too, and bringing Marty as well. His story's amazing, and I'm sure that everybody will absolutely be inspired and everything else by his story. My co-author and I came together to write Soul Models, which is a collection of inspiring stories of people who have overcome some sort of challenge to create a change through compassion for others a few years ago, and the book just released in May and has a collection of stories from celebrities like Eli Manning and David Copperfield and Christy Turlington Burns and Gary Sinise, to just everyday people who I always say should be the celebrities and should be household names, because they're people like Marty who are out there changing the world and making it a better place for all of us. And, you know, a lot of people have heard their stories, but the majority of people haven't even heard the stories of these amazing people. And I was absolutely overwhelmed by how many, when we started this project, how many stories we found that you never hear about, and just the stories that people should be hearing about on the nightly news, but we hear about all this horrible stuff instead of the really inspiring good things. So Marty is in our book. He speaks to thousands of kids every year here in Clark County in Vegas area about staying off drugs from his own experiences with drugs, and connects with these kids in a way that I've never seen. Has tens of thousands of letters in his garage from these kids that have written him letters over the years, and just in some way, you know, I call it divine intervention, call it some kind of gift. I don't know what it is, but he connects with these kids where nobody else can. So I'll let you talk to Marty a little bit more.
Okay. Hey, that's amazing, and welcome, Marty.
Thank you.
Let's just start out. How are you doing this morning?
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing just fine. Doing good. I'm out of school and I'm on vacation with the kids, so that's good.
Yeah, that's great. Vacations are always good. Hey, so if you wouldn't mind, start out by telling us a little bit about your life growing up. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, May 20th, 1936. Lived in almost downtown Cincinnati. My parents were very poor. My father was an alcoholic, and one of the places we lived was in the basement of a tournament house on Vine Street in Cincinnati. Because we couldn't afford an apartment, we lived in the basement, and my mom would, in the wintertime, would keep the furnace going, and they would let us live down there as long as she would maintain the furnace and keep things rolling. It had a dirt floor, and my mom used to tell people that one of my favorite playing places was the coal bin. I would go and play in the coal bin, and I would come out just black with coal dust. But it was not a good life. My mom lost us 3 kids when I was just a baby in arms. We lived in a one-room apartment, and the welfare people came one day and ripped me out of my mom's arms and dragged my brother and sister down the walkway and took us to an orphanage. And we stayed in the orphanage for a short time, and then was transferred to a foster home, where our foster parents, they really didn't want to deal with us. They were just in it for the money. and they kept us locked in a semi-dark room upstairs, never allowed to come out for 2 years. And I don't remember very much about that. I have flashbacks every once in a while of standing upstairs, and there was this little accordion gate across the doorway, and I could hear people talking downstairs, and I wished that I could go down there and be with people. I had to rely quite a bit on what my sister had to say. She was the oldest one when we lived there. And then when I got into kindergarten, I was afraid of people. I had never been around them. And I used to sit over in the corner of the kindergarten room and rock back and forth and sing to myself, because that's all I had to do for 2 years. And the teachers thought there was something wrong with me, and they thought I had a mental problem. But it was just that I had never had interaction with other people, which seems to cause a learning disability that caused me a lot of problems later on in life. My mom kicked my brother and I out on the street. I was 10 and my brother was 12. I became homeless at 10 with a dime in my pocket. And the only alternative we had was to go live with our alcoholic father, who lived in a little town north of Cincinnati. And he was a very abusive drunk. My mother used to beat my brother because he reminded her of my father. And when my brother and I went to live with my father and stepmother, he used to beat me because I reminded him of my mother. So ultimately, I wound up becoming a street kid, living on the street. By the time I was in the 7th grade, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I was taking a cough medicine bottle full of whiskey to school every day just to get me through the day. And after school, when kids were out doing what kids were supposed to be doing, I would be standing in front of the state liquor store begging people to buy me whiskey, which oftentimes they did. I got kicked out of school in the 7th grade. I can remember the principal coming into I had failed the 7th grade, and this was the 2nd year in the 7th grade, and I can remember him walking in the classroom or sticking his head in the door and looking around, and he waved his finger at me like this, and I got up and walked out, and I had made up my mind that that man was never going to lay another hand on me. And he walked me to the office, and he put his arm around my shoulder, and he said, "Marty," he said, "school is not for everybody, and you're one of them." And he handed me a pack of papers, and he said, "Give these papers to your parents and don't come back." And when I walked out the front door of the school, there was one of these swinging garbage cans that had a swinging lid on it, and I threw all those papers away and never went back to school after that. Because I had a learning disability, they interpreted that as being an arrogant and disobedient child. And what do you do to an arrogant and disobedient child? You beat them. And when that doesn't work, you beat them longer and harder, and the child does become arrogant and disobedient. And I can remember standing out in the hall with my teacher and holding my hands out like this, and her beating my hands with a ruler and standing there watching them swell. And she would say, "Cry, damn you, cry," and I refused to cry. Then I would go back into the classroom, and my hands were swollen up so bad I couldn't even hold a pencil. And then she would send me to the principal's office because I refused to do my work. And then I would receive another beating. And then he would call my dad and tell him that I was being arrogant and disobedient, and I would get my 3rd beating in one day from my father. I got in trouble as a young teenager, and there was many times that I would sit out in the football field at night in the little town that I lived in the wintertime, sitting up in the stands crying. and wondering what I had done in this world for people to not like me. And I can remember sitting there and a light mist falling of maybe snow or sleet, and my hair frozen, and sitting there freezing and in the middle of the night in the middle of this football stadium, and I'm the only person there. I used to sleep in hallways, and occasionally some of the neighbors would allow me to come in and sleep on the floor in the hallway. I was too dirty to sleep in a bed or even to be able to lay on the couch. And I had been in juvenile detention 3 times. And the 3rd time I was there, the director of the juvenile detention came up to me and wanted me to go home with him. And I was only 14 years old, but I wasn't stupid. And I interpreted that as being not good for me. And I said some things that I shouldn't have said, and the big mouth got me into trouble again. And the 4th time I got into trouble, they didn't take me to juvenile detention. They drove me to the man's jail in downtown Cincinnati. I was 15 years old in a man's jail in downtown Cincinnati, where nobody wants to be. And I spent a little over 2 months there, and then I was transferred to a boys' prison in Lancaster, Ohio, where I spent 2.5 years in a boys' prison. And while I was there, the guards almost beat me to death. In fact, they beat me up so bad that they hid my body for 2 weeks because they were afraid that if administration would find me, they'd get into trouble. And it was not a very good life as a child and young teenager. And I was 5 months away from being 18, and if I would have turned 18 in that boys' prison, they would have transferred me to the Ohio State Penitentiary until I was 21. And you got to remember, at that time, you were not an adult until you were 21. And unknowing to me, they had wrote all of my relatives in Ohio and my mother and stepfather, who had moved to California, and tried to get them to take me, but nobody wanted me. They said I was a bad person, and they didn't even want me in their house. And only after the 2nd letter, they informed my mother and stepfather that if they didn't take me, they were going to transfer me to the Ohio State Penitentiary until I was 21, and they finally agreed to have me come to California and live with them. And I stayed in California until I went into the service at 19. I went into the Navy, and the only reason I got into the Navy is because I was in between the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and they were really hard up for bodies. And although I didn't have a high school diploma and had been in trouble with the law, I did get into the service at 19, into the Navy. Spent 4 years in the Navy and got out at the highest rate I could go in 4 years without going to 1 day of school. Because I didn't have a high school diploma, I wasn't qualified to go to a service school, and everything I did on my own. And I learned to work on airplanes in the Navy. And the last 6 months while I was there, I was training people into their job that just came out of the schools that I wasn't qualified to go into because of no high school diploma. And I was teaching them how to work on airplanes. So it's been a rough road, but I feel that I've been in training, or I was in training for 50 years for what I do. And if I hadn't gone through the things that I went through, I doubt very much that I would have the knowledge or the background to be able to do what I do today.
And years ago, when this whole project started, it was my daughter who he went and spoke to my daughter's class, and my daughter really hasn't been around any drugs or anything other than a normal kid, sees, but she was in 8th grade, And you know how kids come home and you're like, how was your day? What did you learn? Good. Nothing. You know, that's their answers. She came home and I was fixing dinner and she sat up on that bar stool and talked for an hour and told me every detail of this speech that Marty had come to the school and given. And it was just, it touched her so much. It was just, she was just going on and on for an hour. It was incredible to see, you know, someone who hasn't really, you know, she should have been the kid in that room that was touched the least, really, because she hasn't had that in her life. But it touched her more than anything else in a long time. So.
I got married in September 1962, and we had 3 sons, and all was not well because I had no kind of training as a child. I didn't really know what was expected of me as a father, and I'm not really making excuses for all the stuff that happened, but unfortunately it's a fact. And I was a heavy cigarette smoker and alcohol drinker for many years, and I took my first puff off of a marijuana cigarette when I was 33 years old, and it was less than 2 years later I became a cocaine addict. And from that point on, it was downhill. At that time, I was working for Macaulay Gore Corporation in their airline division. I was running 5 different departments in that airline, and I had college graduates working for me, and I only had a 7th grade education. And we lost our house. We lost everything that we owned. Everything that we owned and went up my nose in cocaine. Our family split up in 1984. 1984 we split up. My wife and 2 sons went to live with their brother up in Lake Tahoe. My oldest son stayed in the town that we lived in, and I became homeless. Basically, my drug addiction ended in the filthy, dirty motel room in Garden Grove, California, sitting on the floor nude, cross-legged, with the fleas and the roaches running all over me, with pus and blood running out of both nostrils because I totally destroyed my sinuses with cocaine. And I had became a drug burnout. Now, if you don't know what a drug burnout is a person that does high-powered white powder drugs for an extended period of time, and their brain retaliates against itself and starts shutting down dopamine receptors. And you do your white powder drugs and you can't get high anymore. And drugs wasn't doing for me what they were supposed to do. The only thing I had left in life at that time was a broken down Toyota pickup truck sitting in the parking lot of that dingy, dirty motel, and a pile of drugs sitting in front of me, and that was it. The family, the home, the job, the career, the decency, the self-respect, it all went up my nose in cocaine, and I was homeless. And I'm sitting there on the floor, nude, cross-legged, with the barrel of a .38 revolver in my mouth. I was going to commit suicide because I couldn't get off of drugs, and drugs wasn't doing for me what they were supposed to do. But I couldn't pull the trigger. I even changed hands and couldn't pull the trigger. I put the gun down and I started to cry. And I got on my knees and I said, Lord, I'm in trouble. I need help. I can't do this alone. I need to get off of drugs. And then strange words started coming out of my mouth. I started saying, Lord, if you will help me get off of drugs, I will devote the rest of my life helping kids stay off of drugs. And at that immediate moment, the Lord came into my life. I had one leg in hell, and the angels in heaven were trying to pull me the other way, and I was saved. And I flushed my drugs down the toilet again. Left that dingy, dirty motel and had no idea the rocky road that lay ahead of me to try to put my life back together. I hadn't paid a bill in 2 years. I had turned all of my friends against me and lost my family, and the only thing I had left, I was barely hanging on to, was a job. And a guy that worked there took me in and let me live in his condo, and he had a spare bedroom. And I lived in his condo for about a year and continued to try to put my life back together. And now I know why people don't get off of drugs, because it's a very difficult and, for a lot of people, impossible process to put their lives back together. Never forgetting my promise to God to help kids get off of drugs, I finally got my younger son and my middle son and my wife back. And when I went to Lake Tahoe to get them, I was so broke. I didn't even have enough money to rent a truck to move their furniture, and I had to borrow the money from my brother-in-law to rent the truck. And moved them back down to Southern California, and slowly trying to put our life together. I owed thousands and thousands of dollars in back taxes to the state of California and to the IRS. The IRS deferred any payments and allowed me to continue to pay the state of California off until I got that paid off. And it took us about 6 or 7 years, me working 2 jobs and her working, to try to pay off all the debts. And we ultimately had to file bankruptcy because, well, like I say, I hadn't paid a bill in 2 years. And I started trying to put a drug program together. I contacted the Best Foundation, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Project Alert or not, but it's a drug program for kids, middle school kids. And I contacted Project Alert and got all the material and went to Clark County School District and actually had the training there for Project Alert. But it wasn't the program that I wanted. It was too long. So I started developing my own program. And in November of 1992, I did my first drug awareness presentation at West Charleston First Presbyterian Church here in Las Vegas. And I had 2 students and a parent in the class. And never in my wildest dreams at that point did I ever think that I would be standing up in front of thousands and thousands of kids, 6th grade through high school, doing drug awareness training for them. This school year, I've talked to over 17,000 kids, and I will probably do that or more next school year. Next school year will be my 15th year doing this program. And I've never asked Clark County School District for 1 cent for doing this program, and never will. After I did church youth groups from 1992 to 2001, and then I was guest speaker at a Henderson Rotary Club meeting, and after the meeting was over, a guy came up to me and introduced himself as a teacher at Silverado High School here in Clark County, and asked me if I would come to his classes and do drug awareness training for his kids, and I jumped at it. And I don't know if you can see this picture or not, but the program back then was very primitive, and I'm kind of ashamed to even show you this. And I was using flip charts on an easel, and this picture was taken at some church group probably about 1994. And I don't know, can you see that picture?
Oh, yeah. Yep, we can see it.
Do you see that? Okay.
Yes.
And this is, and in the 14 years of doing this program, I've got around 100,000 letters from teenagers, and I've talked to 240,000 kids here in Clark County School District. And here is the boxes of letters that I have received from kids. Can you see that?
That's amazing. That's amazing, Marty.
And that's not all of them, because I'm 16 pounds of letters behind on my reading, and I have those 16 pounds in my bedroom, and I will catch up this summer.
Hey,
When
Marty.
you measure your letters in pounds, that's a lot.
I love it. Marty, what are some of the things that the kids tell you in these letters?
Well, I have a letter here from a boy from Del Webb Middle School. They happen to be Del, that's where his daughter went. And he says, thank you so much for coming and talking to us about drugs and the harmful effects that they have on our body. I've had a recent drug and alcohol issue, and you coming and telling it to us about how you lost the two of your sons to that stuff really turned my life around. I realized that drugs and alcohol don't have to be my life, and I'm not going to let it be anymore. I realized that I need to focus on my sports and playing lacrosse, and that family, friends, and school are more important. I just want you to know that you saved my life. Thank you. And that's from a boy from 8th grade boy from Del Webb Middle School.
Well, wait, let me interrupt you just briefly. So you lost. I understood that you lost one son. I didn't realize that you lost two sons. So
well, my second son, my oldest son, went to prison because of drugs.
Okay.
We lost our 20-year-old son in a motorcycle accident in 1989, shortly after we came here to Las Vegas. And that's another story. My youngest son was the youngest manager in a pizza chain that they had. He had his own store at 17 years old. And that's almost unheard of. Mm-hmm. And by the time he was 19, he was manager of the largest pizza store here in Southern California, down by Disneyland. And they were grooming him to be the West Coast District representative of that pizza chain when he reached the age of 21. But drugs and alcohol took care of that, because he got killed in a motorcycle accident at 20 years old. And after his death, that was a signal to me not to stop doing drugs, but to increase the amount of drugs that I was doing. That's typical of a drug addict. Poor Marty. You know, I lost my son. Nobody loves me, and this is the way my life is. I'm going to do more drugs to make the pain go away. And that was a very, very difficult time for both my wife and I after losing him. And then my oldest son went to prison because of prescription painkillers.
Was he dealing them? Is that why he went to prison? Was he dealing the painkillers?
Was he dealing the painkillers?
No, not to my knowledge. He wasn't. When we went to his apartment to clean his apartment out, we found a notebook with page after page after page of names and addresses and phone numbers of doctors that he was getting prescription painkillers from. But as far as him dealing them, not to my knowledge. No.
So why did they send him to prison? Why did he go to prison for that?
Well, because as a result of being high on prescription painkillers, he had multiple hit-and-run accidents.
Okay.
And he was involved in a hit-and-run accident with his young nephew in the truck with him, and that didn't set too well with the judge. And he was a 3-time loser. And they sent him to prison and put him through a drug program while he was in there.
Is he out now?
Say again?
Is
he out of prison now?
He is out of prison, but he is back in jail. And if the judge, he gets sentenced on the 30th of this month, and if the judge interprets the law the way we think he's going to, He's going to impose the 3 strikes you're out law on him, and probably spend the rest of his life in prison in California. Okay. This is another letter from a girl from Coronado High School. Dear Marty Gruber, thank you for the inspirational words you dropped on us last week. You have changed my mind about drugs. Before you came, I was hooked on LSD and crystal meth. But after I heard the story about the girl and the drug dealer, it changed my life. And I have over 100,000 letters just like these. Okay.
Wow. So what's the story about the girl and the drug dealer?
I knew a young lady by the name of Janice. She was 19 years old. Janice was a very beautiful young lady. In fact, she was so pretty you could have said she could have been a model or beauty queen, however you wanted to say it. She had a lot of people around her who cared a lot about her, but she made the mistake and fell for a drug dealer. And her friends told her that if you continue to hang around with bimbo drug dealer, we're going to disown you. She didn't listen, and she moved in with the drug dealer. Time passed, 5 months. Remember that. One day, the drug dealer called me and asked me if I would come down and help him on his boat on Saturday morning, and I said I would, and I did. I walked into the garage at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, and he said, if you want coffee, there's coffee on in the kitchen. When I walked into the kitchen, there was an individual sitting at the kitchen table that I didn't immediately recognize. She was making an unsuccessful attempt at eating a bowl of cereal. Big globs of her blonde hair had fallen out. Her jaws were sunken in. Her eyes were bugged out of her head. Her skin had this real grayish, ashen, unhealthy color about it. And no joke, no exaggeration, her arms and legs were about this big around. She looked like one of these people you see in these old Nazi concentration camp movies where they're starving to death. And she had large weeping sores all over her body, about the size of a quarter. And these weeping sores were weeping pus and blood. When she saw me, she got up from the table and walked towards me, and when we got into front of each other, we made eye contact, and I was looking death in the face. And the smell of rot and decay coming from her was overwhelming. This was Janice. This was this beautiful, intelligent young lady 5 months after moving in with the drug dealer. Without saying a word, she walked past me, went into the bedroom, and closed and locked the door. And I went out into the garage and got into a heated argument with her, left without helping him on his boat. I went to Janice's ex-girlfriend's house, and I left the note on the door, and I said in the note for her to call me that evening. It was an emergency, which she did. And when I told her what I saw, she said, well, that couldn't have been Janice. That has to be somebody else. I said, no, that was Janice. I said, if you have any feelings left for this girl at all, go down there and get her out of there. That evening, Janice's ex-girlfriend and her ex-girlfriend's football-playing buddy went to the drug dealer and confronted him. He wouldn't let him in the house, but the football player just pushed him to the side, and he went in and kicked the bedroom door in, and there stood Janice with the coke pipe. They wrenched the coke pipe out of her hand. They grabbed the blanket off of the bed and wrapped her in a blanket and put her in the back seat of their car and rushed her to Hoag Memorial Hospital in Newport Beach, California, where she died 5 days later. And the death certificate said that she died from acute malnutrition. In other words, she starved herself to death. She couldn't put the coke pipe down long enough to eat. And because she wasn't eating and her body function shut down, all the cocaine she was smoking poisoned her blood system, and the sores she had all over her was the body's last-ditch effort to save itself before death. Oh yeah, and I forgot to tell you, when Janice died in the hospital, she weighed 75 pounds. Jesus. And I tell this story to all girl classes, and it has a very profound impact on them, as it did this girl in this letter. Okay. Tragic.
It is tragic, Marty. So you developed a drug program. Can you tell us about that? Because you started off with one program and you weren't happy with it, and you decided to create your own program. So can you tell us a little bit about that process and what it is that came out of that, what came to fruition?
Well, the Project Alert program is 11-step program, and that would require me to be in a classroom for 11 periods, which the school district is not going to do that. Okay, I take about 85 days from Clark County School District the way it is, and so I felt that what has happened to me with drugs and my family would be a benefit to include that in a drug program, because the kids would be able to relate to it. They would be able to relate what happened to my sons, what happened to me, and what happened to my wife, and it come to be true that the thing that is mentioned the most in these letters is about my youngest son who died in a motorcycle accident. And I kind of throw that on him in a sneaky way to get the most impact out of it. I hold up his picture and I have it on a transparency on the screen, and I tell him all about how he died. And then at the end I say, this is Christopher, my youngest son. And you should see the jaws drop. And you can see the impact. In fact, I stand up in front of these kids and I witnessed the transformation on the faces of these kids that were contemplating doing drugs, experimenting with drugs, and it becomes a reality check for them that now they know by the time I'm done with them what drugs is going to do to them if they continue on the path that they've chosen, or if they choose that path of life. And these kids today are very, very intelligent kids. I don't ever remember being that smart when I was a kid.
I agree.
But they are extremely intelligent. They're searching for answers about life. And I intend to give them as many of those answers as I can, as long as I can, and to keep them from going through what my family went through, and not have them live that devastating life of drug addiction. And it's I've been down that road of drug addiction and back. And I tell these kids, I know what's waiting for you on that filthy, dirty, crooked road to drug addiction, and it's not nice. There are bad people and bad things on that road, and it's a path in life that you've got to avoid at all costs. And it has an effect on them. And the letters reflect on what they learned from and incidentally, a lot of these kids don't believe what their teachers are telling them. And I get it all the time from them. Well, you know, my teacher never did drugs. Now they're reading something out of a book that I'm not supposed to do this, and my question is why? And I provide those answers for them, and I tell them why. And the first day of the 2-day program, I tell them what drugs are going to do to them. And the second day, I show them what drugs are going to do to them. I show them a 24-minute video of people who are hooked on drugs and what they look like. Then after the video is over, I ask the class, I tell them, I have one question for you, and I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you would like to look like the people you saw in this video? Raise your hand. And no hands go up. And then I tell them, all right, you know what you got to do. You got to keep saying no. And those people sitting around you trying to get you to look like this are not your friends. In fact, they don't even like you. Because the bottom line is this, young people, friends don't hook friends on drugs, period. And if there's somebody in your life calling you friend and they're trying to get you to do drugs, they're not your friends. Shine them on and get real friends, because a friend will not hook a friend on drugs. and that's usually at the end of the second day of the 2-day presentation, and it works. It works quite a bit too.
Hey,
And
Marty, I'm amazed. I'd like to throw this open to our panel. So I've got on the panel Dennis Deuce and Kristen Drysdale. I'd like to throw it out to you guys for comments and any questions that you might have.
Okay.
Okay. So Kristen?
I remember being in school and seeing someone of like around 70, 80 years old, around your age, come and speak to us, and there was just something so powerful about what he had to say, and it really makes me think about the power and the impact that that our older generation can have on the younger. And I really want to thank you for doing what you do. And if there could be a way to encourage others to share their experiences, I think that would be very powerful in the schools.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I intend to keep doing this program as long as this old body will allow me. I just turned 78 in May, and teachers ask me all the time, how long are you going to continue to do this? And I tell them I'm just going to do it one school year at a time, and do it as long as I can.
Do you think it kind of keeps you young, being around the energy of the youth?
Do you think it keeps you young, being around the energy of youth?
Well, yes, it does, because it keeps me on my toes, and you know, it's not easy being in a gym, talking to 6 different classes at 6 different times of 200 kids per class, and keeping it going, keeping them interested, and getting your point across. And it takes a lot of energy to do that. And I'm in good shape. I just had a major heart procedure that's put me in able to continue to do this program, and going to do it as long as I can.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Marty, you're there every single school day, right? Is that correct?
No. I've reduced the amount of schools that I do quite a bit, but the reduction in the number of schools has not reduced the number of students, because the schools have increased the number of students they allow to see this program. So this past school year, I presented at 34 different schools, okay, and I presented to about 17,000 kids. So and that's enough for me. Now I'm picking up new schools next school year, and so I will probably do about 37, maybe 38 schools next school year.
That's crazy. Hey, Dennis, any comments from you and any questions? Oh, I think you're muted. We're not hearing you, Dennis.
I turned my sound off so that I wouldn't interrupt, and yeah. I want to show some of the comments from the audience. Marty, you have just really been touching people from early on. Carmen Mandich put this up. I'm astonished, Marty Gruber, how such hardship has made you more of a survivor and given you the inspiration to help others. Truly inspiring how a hard life has made you strong of spirit and tender of heart. I love that. Strong of spirit and tender of heart. My wife says, what a great outlook. I've been in 50 years of training, so I can do what I do. I'm totally crushing on Marty. Of course, that's a quote because my wife's not even 50 yet, so she's not talking about herself.
He's 25, right?
Yeah, exactly. My wife's 25 and I'm 26.
I'm younger than you. I'm 16.
16 with 50 years worth of training. Krithika got this great quote up, and I mean, holy cow, she's not on camera and she's still dominating the show today. You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In fact, it may be necessary to encounter the defeats so you can know who you are, what you can rise from, and how you can still come out of it. Maya Angelou. So those are some of the quotes from the audience. I am just absolutely floored. What you have been through and how you have turned that into a tool for good is absolutely an unbelievable story. Angela, thank you for bringing him on. This is clearly an example of a soul model. I mean, your comment at the beginning that some of the less famous people are the ones that should be famous, holy cow. This guy's the real deal. And I do want to point out, I searched him because I wanted to make a picture quote with that quote from Krithika, so I was looking for pictures of Marty. If you type in Marty Gruber in Google, the first thing that comes up that, they give you suggestions is Marty Gruber, Las Vegas. And right underneath that, it says Marty Gruber, I can't remember what it was, but like drug assistance or something like that. I mean, Google has this guy's number. He's the real deal, let me tell you.
Do we have time for one more story or not?
We have a question too if somebody wants the address to provide like gas cards for you or financial help for the program. So this will be public online for everyone.
My address?
But it would be public.
But it would be public.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all right.
All right. Well, I'll post the address. The question was, where could financial help be sent? Was one of the questions in the comments, and I'll post the address in the event later after I talk with Marty too. So.
And just a little note about that. It's expensive doing this. I pay for my own supplies. I pay for my own gas and car repairs, and I'm retired on a fixed income, and I don't receive donations, but any financial help that could come in to help keep these kids off of drugs and allow me to continue to do this program would be greatly appreciated. It really would. Can't hear him.
I think you're on mute again.
Wow.
You know what? I'm going to
muted my own microphone and got muted in the process. James, I want to throw a challenge out to the Dream audience. Anyone who is good with Patreon, reach out to us. I think we ought to set Marty up with his own Patreon page. The stuff that this guy is doing is exactly that kind of thing. I'm not a Patreon expert. I'm barely trying to work through that process myself. But if anyone out there knows that tool or other crowdsourcing tools, this guy, again, the real deal, and that's the way to answer what he's asking for here.
Hey, Dash, can you describe just briefly what Patreon is?
Okay, so Patreon is a crowdfunding where you can donate anything from like $1 on up a month, and you just sign up for it, and the money goes to whoever you're supporting. So different people can do different things. For example, Craig Chamberlain has one for his online how-to training videos, so that he doesn't have to sell advertising, but can still continue to do what he does. We're trying to build one for bandwidth, because that's a very expensive project that we're working on. This is exactly the kind of thing, you could agree to donate 50 cents a month. You could donate $50 a month, and that money would go directly to Marty. Of course, somebody would have to get together with Marty and Angela to set it up so that the money goes where it's supposed to go. But this is, to me, this is a great cause and a perfect fit for Patreon.
Absolutely.
I actually work with Patreon a little bit, so I might be able to help.
There you go, dream audience at work.
Kristen, you can just reach out to me and we'll connect and get it all figured out.
All right, awesome.
Okay, perfect. So Marty, you said you had one more story, so yeah.
Okay, but I'm going to show you a book that I wrote, Searching for the Truth About Drugs, The Life and Calling of Marty Gruber. And this book was wrote with teenagers in mind. It's my life story, and also there is a whole bunch of drug information in this book. I'm getting letters back from kids now who had a drug problem, and they read the book, and they stopped doing drugs. And that's the purpose of the book, is to help people who have drug problems. But if you want to know more about my life and more in detail, it's all in Searching for the Truth About Drugs, The Life and Calling of Marty Gruber. Okay? Do we have time for the story?
Please, Marty, please tell us one more.
Okay. I was at a middle school. This was about 5 years ago, and I was in the little theater. It's their lecture center. It has a stage and everything in it. And I was doing multiple classes. Well, the first day before the first class, in came a special ed teacher with 2 boys in tow and a wheelchair bed type arrangement with somebody in there. I had no idea at that time who was in this bed arrangement that she had pushed in. And she put the boys in the seats in the back, and she sat in the seat by the aisle where the wheelchair thing's at. And in come the 3 classes. Well, for some reason, I just didn't feel like I was connecting with this group of kids, and which is unusual. And the kids come in, sat down, I did the presentation, and they got up and left, and the lady in the wheelchair, they left, and I thought, there was just something wrong. I just didn't connect with these kids. Well, the next day, and then I did multiple classes after that I didn't have that feeling. I felt like they got the message, but that first class of 3 classes combined, I just didn't feel like I had connected with them. The next day, in come the special ed teacher with the 2 boys in tow, pushing the wheelchair arrangement, and sat where they sat before. And in come the 3 classes. They sat down, and I started doing the presentation, and something was missing. I just didn't feel like I was connecting with them. And then the feeling come over me at that point that there was going to be a happening in that room this morning, and I didn't know exactly what. But as I'm presenting to this class, I started moving to my left towards where the special ed teacher was sitting and the boys in the wheelchair arrangement. And I didn't break my stride. I didn't stop talking. I kept presenting, and I walked over to where this wheelchair arrangement was, and I looked down in it, and there was a 14-year-old boy who was in the advanced stages of cerebral palsy. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I reached down, and I took his hand, and he smiled. And I said to him, I said, the Lord loves you, and so do I. And I bent over, and I gave him a kiss on the forehead, and I got a standing ovation from 3 classes of teenagers in that room, and I had connected with them. And that's one of the perks of doing this program, is you run into situations like that, and you take a bad situation and turn it around and put it to work for you, and it turned out to be pretty good.
Well, Marty, you are certainly an inspiration to all of us. Thank God that you're on the planet. Thank God that you saved your life that night so that you could bring all of this to all of these kids that you've touched. It's just amazing. So I'd like to, we've got about 5 more minutes. I'd like to hear, again, maybe some closing thoughts from Kristen and Dennis and any additional comments or questions that you might have. And if our audience, I mean, we can hold on just for a little bit. If anyone in our audience has any questions for Marty, I would love to hear them as well. So, Kristen?
Okay. Gosh, just you've really touched all of us here. I'm so grateful that you came and that you shared. I feel like I'm gonna go on with the rest of this day being a better person because of having heard you. And wow, you're just really inspiring, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Dennis?
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. Literally, what James said is correct. The world is a better place because you are here and you are in it. And thank you so much for what you do for the kids, you know, and wow. I really, I'm speechless because I am just so floored by the power of your message.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And these kids joined my army. They go home and they get their parents off of drugs, their brothers and sisters, and their friends, and they become anti-drug for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Hey, Marty, do you have any specific success story that you can tell us along those lines of, you know, somebody who's come back, maybe one of the kids who was gone and rescued their parents? Do you have a specific story that you can?
Well, I had my wife and I and some friends were having a buffet at one of the casinos a few years ago, and a boy and a girl walked up to our table, and they had a paper and pencil in hand, and they walked up and handed me the paper and a pencil, and the girl says, "Can we have your autograph?"
Awesome.
And I signed the girl's paper. The boy was younger. I signed his paper, and I said, "How do you know me?" And she says, "Well, that's my sister sitting over there, and you saved her life." And the sister is sitting with her family a few tables over, and she's got her hand up, waving to me like this. And I meet kids on the street, and they tell me the same thing, that if it hadn't been for going through this presentation, they were going down the wrong road, and it completely changed their life, turned them around, and I encourage them to stay in school, stay drug-free, and to go home and give their parents a hug because they deserve it, and they do. And it's helped many, many thousands of kids here in Las Vegas.
Well, that's the legacy. So, Angela, as we close out, can you put a link up for Marty's book, so if people want to buy his book?
I think Dennis already did, didn't you, Dennis?
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, I think he says yes. So, Angela, if you have
Yeah, I did, and so did William Rock, actually. We've got 2 links up, plus a picture of the cover image.
Awesome. You guys rock. Okay. And then, yeah.
You got it?
They got it.
You got it.
Oh, hey, Angela, so I think we lost your picture.
Yeah. Oh, that's because of me.
What happened, Dennis?
I turned on the camera
There, I
thing,
think we're back
and
now.
she's never run it before.
Oh, cool. Okay. So, hey, Angela, so any closing thoughts?
You know, Marty's story is amazing. Every soul model I interviewed, I got off the phone or from interviewing them in person and felt the same way. They are the people that we should be hearing about constantly, that should have their own reality shows following them around, inspiring more people, that should be household names. And, you know, I really wish that Marty could reach every child out there in the world, because I do feel like it'd make a huge impact on our drug problem, because he reaches these kids.
Great. That's amazing. Well, I'm inspired. We'll make sure that as many people as we can at least get to see this video, you know what I mean? The more that you are able to put yourself out there, Marty, the more lives that you will touch. So I'm touched. I feel honored to have you know, gotten to know you briefly here for a few minutes this morning. And I know everybody on our panel is touched, and everybody who was fortunate enough to be in the audience to hear you live. One of the cool things about this show, Marty, Hangouts on Air in general on Google Plus, is it's recorded, and then after this show is over, it uploads automatically into YouTube, where it can literally reside forever. So our panel, Angela, everybody who we know can share this out and let people know, especially people who have kids, let them know the importance of what you're doing and give them the opportunity to watch, you know, this show and listen to what you have to say. So I'm hoping that by coming on our show, Marty, that we'll be able to touch some lives that maybe would have never heard this message otherwise. So I want to once again thank you for coming on to the show. Yeah, and that's...
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, guys. Well, once again, another awesome and amazing episode of Get Busy without Kit and with Jim. Hopefully Kit will be back next week. Next week, I think it's Larry, and I can never pronounce his last name, so I'm not even going to try, but Larry from Trinidad and Tobago. He's a chef down there, and he's an awesome and amazing person, and he's going to be on our show next week. It'll be a bit lighter fare, but you know what? We definitely have to mix it up. So anyways, thank you so much, Marty, for being with us this week, and we will talk to you, our dream audience, later.